Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. Progress, backlash, health, and trauma. Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom Egypt. Fixing broken things. So the first intermediate period is what followed the Old Kingdom. And it was 100 years of civil war. I mean, it's noblemen fighting other noblemen over the question of who gets to be pharaoh. And the winner, as the map will show you, is the people in the south, the princes of Thebes. Why? Why did they win? They don't have the most people. They're way in the south. They're actually the last major city before the cataracts. Why? And the answer is they had access to African trade, which gave them an economic advantage, which they turned into hiring African mercenaries, which gave them a military advantage. So they were willing to use the advantages that they had to compound their advantages, to stack, to buff their advantages, and then to use them to defeat their enemies. Were pyramids legitimacy for the Middle Kingdom? No. No. Pyramids had worked for the Old Kingdom until they didn't. They were expensive, they're time-consuming, and so by the time we get to the Middle Kingdom, pyramids are kind of passé. They're what the Old Kingdom did. We have to do something new. They're too expensive. They're too time-consuming. They worked for the Old Kingdom for 500 years or 800 years. Why relive the past? So the Middle Kingdom is going to have to find something new. So let's talk about healthcare, because what we have is a bunch of breakthroughs now. Like many things, healthcare in ancient Egypt was continuous from the Old Kingdom, which was good. We have a continuous culture. So it's building on knowledge. It's building on the infrastructure. We don't have a dark age. Like that 100 years of civil war didn't rip up the culture, didn't destroy Egypt. It's basically a bunch of gang fights. So they're not blowing up hospitals. They're not murdering doctors. It's not a genocide. So most people were kind of unaffected by the intermediate period. Like, there's no pharaoh, but okay, so what? Who cares? Where am I pay a dude my taxes, and I'm left alone. I grow my farm. I farm my land. So healthcare was continuous from the Old Kingdom. So it was building on previous knowledge, which was good. We have female medical doctors who handled female healthcare. And in emergencies, definitely male healthcare too, but you definitely had specialists, female specialists, handling female specialized issues. You also had herbs, foods, diet. You know, the understanding was what you put into your body affected how your body worked. If you ever hear your body is an engine, this is what the ancient Egyptians 4,000 years ago thought. There's rituals, there's prayers to the female gods for female issues. There's magic as a way of controlling nature. We have papyrus written and collected about anatomy, so we have textbooks. The sharing of knowledge. In Egypt, knowledge was more easily shared than in Mesopotamia. Yes, writing happens first on cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia, but they're big, heavy clay tablets. You can't really carry them around. Whereas a papyrus, you can roll. You could roll, wrap it with a bow, and carry it and hold on to it. You could stack them on bookshelves, on papyrus shelves. And so knowledge is more easily distributed. Plus, everyone speaks and writes Egyptian, right, in Egypt. So you have the collection of textbooks and in issues of anatomy. The heart is a pump. They know it's moving your blood through your body. How? Not really sure. But they know it's doing that. They could do surgery. There's textbooks on dentistry. Think about that. Dentistry. People were having problems with their teeth. Well, of course they are. They're eating all of this plant food. Of course they're having problems with their teeth because they're grinding them down, right? But they also had mental health. Ideas of depression. And for old people, dementia. And how to treat these things. So, healthcare in Egypt is very practical. It's mostly farmer injuries, and that's why women doctors are taking care of women, because it's a lot of reproductive, gender and sexual healthcare. Men have a lot of injuries. They drain infections, set broken bones, recover from bites from animals. Female healthcare was gynecological and specialized. The womb was seen as the source of female problems. Why? Because men don't have a womb. So if there's a problem a woman's having, it's probably there because that was the difference, right? Otherwise, so they had timing to the moon cycle. They used herbs for abortions. And not just for women who didn't want to be pregnant, but also for pregnancies that were dangerous or bad, that the child had died in the womb. So, Egyptians also had concepts of an hour disease, which was natural. Diseases Egyptians got and gave to each other were seen as part of society, were natural. But there were also these unnatural diseases that were foreign. The Canaanite disease, which was a plague. It had to have come from the Canaanites. It had to come from these people across the desert. Not surprisingly, several of the foreign diseases are sexually transmitted ones. Right? Merchants come, they have sex in the brothels, then other guys go to the brothels, have sex with the prostitutes, get the disease, and so sexually transmitted disease. We'll see this in the early 1500s when the Spanish come back with syphilis from the New World. Well, those troops were sent to fight in Italy. They had sex with Italian prostitutes, but then they got kicked out of northern Italy by the French when the French invaded, those French soldiers then had sex with Italian prostitutes, thus spreading syphilis. So they didn't call it syphilis; they call it the Italians called it the Spanish disease. The French called it the Italian disease, and you could see the Egyptians called it the Canaanite disease. So there's diseases that you get that are like normal because everyone gets them. They get them every year, and they're part of living in Egypt. But then there's those foreign diseases, those novel diseases. COVID, right, is a perfect example of that. President Trump kept trying to tell you this is not an American disease. It's from China. It's a Chinese disease. And he came up with rather descriptive terms to try to make that connection. But the Egyptians did this. We call the plague, the Great Plague of 1919, the Spanish flu. It's not the American flu, even though American troops got it and spread it. The main vector for the Spanish flu were Americans. But we don't call it the American flu. We call it the Spanish flu. So there's an our disease versus a their disease. And those foreigners, those dirty foreigners, are always sicker, more disease, have grosser problems than we do. So then how does the Middle Kingdom have legitimacy? Culture. Cultural creation. Stories, plays, poems. They send the circus to every little town. They put on shows for free. They tell the people how great Pharaoh is. They make stories about how Pharaoh helps young lovers get married when their parents are against it. right? Think Robin Hood. When Richard III, you might always forget this because Richard III is never talked about, but he shows up at the end of Robin Hood to marry Robin Hood and Maid Marian. Right? He shows up at the end and everyone's like, oh, the king is here. Oh, everything's going to be great now. Get rid of the Sheriff of Nottingham, right? The king will solve all the problems. That's a lot of these Middle Kingdom Egyptian stories. How the pharaoh shows up at the end and solves all the problems. This is soft power. Hard power is military power. Hard power is money. Soft power is people's perception of you, right? Old kingdom pharaohs had hard power. They had money. They could hire you to build a pyramid. Now, they didn't make armies. So that part of hard power wasn't it. But they used money. And the more money they had, the bigger their pyramid was. And the more people they hired. Very hard, very fact-based. You could put hard power on a spreadsheet. Soft power is amorphous. Soft power is culture. Soft power is what people think of you before you experience the thing. Many of you had a perception of me as a professor and my class before you even took it, before you even met me. That's soft power. If it's good, if it's a good perception, great. That's good for me. If it's a bad perception, well, I'm sorry. So why do it this way? It's cheap. Actors are cheap. The circus is cheap. Right? Putting on a show is cheap, and it affects lots of people. Lots of people are going to go want to see the show. Think about how much entertainment there could possibly be in an Egyptian rural town in 1850 BC. There's not much. These are a bunch of farmers. You know, there's not nothing, obviously. People need to be entertained. But in comes this giant thing from the capital, sent by the pharaoh. This is the coolest thing that's going to happen all year. So everyone's going to go. So the theater is cheap. Actors are cheap because they don't want to be farmers. The construction workers, the playwrights, it's cheap. As Shakespeare says, actors are a dime a dozen. Why? Because your option is to be a farmer. And even though farming is good in Egypt, there's plenty of people who say, I don't want to be a farmer. And so way cheaper than pyramids is this cultural creation, these stories, these plays, these poems. And it affects just as many people, if not more. And these people walk away from the play going, Pharaoh's a good guy. I like Pharaoh. Little kids are like, I want to be Pharaoh. And when they play, I'm going to be Pharaoh. I'm going to be Pharaoh. Right? It's nice. But there's a problem. What's the problem? They can't control who hears the stories or how they interpret those stories. The Egyptians hear the story one way, but Mesopotamian pirates hear another. So here's a story. Pharaoh is so popular, he doesn't even need an army to protect his enormous wealth. He has so much money. I mean, he's got like a pyramid just full of gold and no guards. Doesn't need them because Pharaoh is so beloved by his people. Well, if you're an Egyptian, you hear that as go, Pharaoh's a good guy. If you're a Mesopotamian pirate, you hear easy money to steal. And so you can't control who hears your stories. And that ends in the Hyksos invasion. The destruction of the Middle Kingdom is when people from across the desert invade, when Mesopotamian pirates invade Egypt. They cross the Sinai Desert, they cross the Eastern Desert, enter into Egypt, into the Nile River Delta, and destroy the Middle Kingdom. Kill the pharaoh, they loot, they burn things down, they take money. And Egypt's so nice, they don't want to leave. So it's like if you've ever been on Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland or Disney World, where it's just these guys burning down stuff and getting drunk and hanging out. Like, they don't want to leave. So Egypt needs a superhero. The Middle Kingdom is gone. It has died in blood and trauma. It has been burned down. Old Kingdom faded away. This is a clear end of a Middle Kingdom. It died. It was murdered by the Hyksos, who were Mesopotamian pirates with chariots and horses, right? The Egyptians don't, remember we talked about in the Old Kingdom that the Egyptians are kind of behind? They don't have horses. They don't have chariots. They can't fight these guys. These guys are like aliens with super weapons. So you need a hero, a superhero to save Egypt. And that will be Ahmose. Ahmose is that hero. Ahmose will build an army. Ahmose will unify the Egyptians. Ahmose will kick out the Hyksos. But he did not rebuild the Middle Kingdom. He did not rebuild a kingdom of culture and stories. Why? Because the Middle Kingdom weakness could never be allowed to happen again. Again, we talk about trauma and backlash, right? The Middle Kingdom had failed. And so we're going to do something new. We're not going to go back again. The new kingdom, Ahmose's kingdom that he's going to build, is going to be a militarized kingdom of war. Thank you. Be safe and bye.